In just a few seconds, the mood in that studio shifted and everyone felt the tension rising fast. What happens when a conversation that's meant to be light-hearted spirals into one of the most jaw-dropping, tense moments ever broadcast on live television? That morning, the audience at The View was buzzing with the usual energy, the laughter, the chatter, the clinking of coffee mugs. But nobody could have predicted that the calm-polished presence of Zendaya would collide so explosively with the quick-witted, unfiltered remarks of Whoopi Goldberg. And as the camera rolled, the air in the studio became electric. If you're ready to witness the tension, hit that subscribe button and like this video. Then drop a comment with your thoughts because this is the kind of on-air clash that will have you talking for days. Zendaya entered the set, her posture graceful yet deliberate, the kind that commands attention without even trying. Her outfit, a sleek, modern take on classic elegance, caught the studio lights, reflecting the poise she was famous for. The audience's applause was warm but polite, a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Zendaya had been here before, yes, but this time there was a different energy, a tension that even she could feel in the pit of her stomach. Whoopi, on the other hand, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room with a mischievous glint. She had the kind of presence that could dominate any conversation, that could turn a calm chat into a verbal battlefield within seconds. And she didn't hide it. Her smirk hinted that she had already decided this interview wasn't going to be ordinary. The viewers at home, though unaware of what was about to unfold, sensed it, too. Something was about to ignite. The discussion began innocently enough. Whoopi asked about Zendaya's latest project. Her tone casual but with that underlying edge that always kept her guests on their toes. "So Zendaya," she said, leaning forward, "you've been doing a lot of different roles lately. How do you decide which ones really speak to you?" The audience murmured softly, intrigued by the apparent normality of the question. And Zendaya smiled, a small polite smile, the kind meant to ease tension while she formulated her response. "I look for characters that challenge me," Zendaya replied, her voice calm but precise. "I want to tell stories that feel authentic, that resonate with people in unexpected ways." Her words were careful, considered, but Whoopi's eyes narrowed slightly, a sign that she wasn't satisfied with a rehearsed answer. She was already circling, looking for an opening, a point of friction. "You mean you don't just pick the fun roles, the ones that make you look pretty on screen?" Whoopi asked, the corner of her mouth curling into a sly grin. The audience gasped softly. There was a playful undertone, but underneath an undeniable challenge. Zendaya's smile faltered ever so slightly, though her composure remained intact. She knew the game Whoopi played, the art of probing, of poking where it stung just enough to see how someone reacted. "I choose what feels right for the story," Zendaya answered evenly, her eyes meeting Whoopi's. There was a pause, a split second pregnant with anticipation, where the entire studio seemed to hold its breath. Even the crew behind the cameras seemed frozen, knowing, as anyone in live TV knows, that a spark had been lit. Whoopi leaned back, letting the silence hang, her gaze unwavering. "But isn't there pressure, though, from the industry, from fans, to pick the roles that keep your image untouchable?" Her words cut just enough to pierce the polished exterior Zendaya had carefully maintained, and the actress shifted slightly, a subtle tightening of the jaw that only the closest observers might notice. Zendaya took a breath, steadying herself. "Of course there's pressure," she admitted, voice still measured, but firmer now. "But I think there's a difference between choosing something because it's expected of you and choosing something because it's meaningful. And I want my work to matter more than it just looks good on a resume." The audience responded with scattered applause, sensing the conviction, sensing the tension that had been simmering under the surface. Whoopi's grin widened. A glint of mischief mixed with incredul. "Meaningful, huh?" she said, tilting her head. "Some people call it meaningful. Others call it playing it safe." The jab wasn't overt, but it landed like a spark in a dry room. Zendaya's eyes flickered, and for a moment, just a fraction of a second, you could see the wheels turning. An internal debate, a weighing of words and consequences. "That's one way to look at it," Zendaya replied coolly, but with an edge that hadn't been there moments ago. "But I'd rather take risks with my art than risk compromising who I am." The studio audience erupted into a collective intake of breath, sensing the first ripple of what was quickly becoming a storm. Whoopi leaned forward, elbows on the table, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Oh, we're talking about risk now," she said, her voice low and teasing. but edged with something sharper. Because, honey, you're in a world where everyone's trying not to offend anyone, trying not to step out of line, and you're telling me you're the rebel, the risk-taker. The words hung in the air, and suddenly the polite, controlled rhythm of the interview was gone. What had started as a simple conversation about roles was now a dance of wits, a verbal joust between two strong personalities. Zendaya didn't flinch. Her posture straightened, her voice dropping into a controlled intensity. "I'm not trying to be a rebel," she said. "I'm just trying to be honest. And sometimes honesty, it makes people uncomfortable." A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. The tension was now palpable. Every word, every glance carried weight, and it was clear that neither woman was willing to back down. The camera caught the tiniest flicker of amusement in Whoopi's eyes, but also a respect, a recognition that she had found someone who could match her. The audience leaned in, captivated, as if the studio itself had transformed into a silent battlefield. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a collision of perspectives, a clash between authenticity and scrutiny, between seasoned bravado and emerging confidence. And as the exchange continued, the viewers at home would later describe this moment as electric, as something rare and unfiltered, a glimpse behind the curtain of celebrity interviews. You could feel the studio pulse with it. Feel the anticipation, the unspoken challenge that hung between Zendaya and Whoopi. This wasn't just another appearance. This was a confrontation that would ripple through social media headline sites and fan forums for weeks to come. The tension was mounting, building toward a breaking point that nobody yet could predict. Each answer, each retort was like a chess move, calculated, daring, but dangerous. And as Zendaya's next words prepared to land, the studio held its breath, the lights glinting off polished surfaces, cameras rolling, and the audience caught in the thrill of watching history in the making. It was in that precise, fragile moment, the pause before a word, before a retort, that everyone knew something shocking was about to happen. And when it did, it would be unforgettable. The room seemed to shrink, the energy tightening like a coiled spring. Zendaya's calm exterior had begun to shimmer under the weight of Whoopi's probing. It was subtle at first, a slight narrowing of the eyes, the way her fingers tapped lightly against her lap. But anyone watching closely could feel the tension building, a silent countdown before the storm hit. Whoopi, sensing it, leaned in just enough to make her presence felt, her grin both teasing and predatory. The audience watched, silent but electric, as if they could feel the collision before it happened. "Let me ask you this," Whoopi continued, her tone now sharper, slicing through the polite veneer of the conversation. "Do you ever worry that all this perfection, all this image you're carrying, it's choking the real you, the one behind the roles, behind the fame?" The words hung in the air like a challenge. The cameras caught the slight catch in Zendaya's breath, the brief flash of something raw and human beneath her polished composure. "I think that's the risk we all take when we put ourselves out there," Zendaya replied. Her voice steady but lead with tension. "I've learned to navigate it, to stay true to who I am, even when the world expects something else from me." Her gaze met Whoopi's, unflinching, but there was a steeliness now, a subtle fire that hadn't been there at the beginning of the interview. The audience sensed it immediately. This wasn't a friendly chat anymore. This was a test, a battle of wills. Whoopsi's eyebrows arched, a flicker of admiration hidden behind the sharpness in her voice. "Test, huh?" she said. "You're making it sound like some kind of game, but it's not a game, baby. It's real life, and people notice the slip-ups, the cracks, even the tiniest ones." Her words, though casual on the surface, were loaded with implication. She was challenging Zendaya's control, questioning her polish, and the audience could almost hear the collective heartbeat of the studio as tension coiled tighter. Zendaya leaned forward slightly, her hands resting lightly on the table. "I know that," she said, her voice firmer now, "and I'm okay with it. I've made peace with the fact that people will always have opinions, whether they understand me or not. I'm not trying to be untouchable. I'm trying to be honest." There was a pause, a beat where time seemed to slow, and the audience's energy shifted. The air almost humming with anticipation. "Honest," Whoopi echoed, leaning back and letting out a soft laugh, though it wasn't entirely playful. "Honey, honesty has a price, and sometimes the people you think will understand don't. You think you're prepared for that?" The question wasn't rhetorical. Whoopi's voice carried weight, authority, and a subtle warning as though she was testing Zendaya's mettle in real time. Zendaya held her gaze, her expression unreadable for a heartbeat, then softened slightly, revealing a human vulnerability beneath the composure. "I faced criticism before," she admitted, her tone steady, but carrying an undercurrent of defiance. "And yes, it hurts sometimes, but I'd rather risk the discomfort than live behind a mask. That's the reality of being in this business." The audience responded with a ripple of murmurs, some nodding in agreement, others wide-eyed at the intensity of the exchange. Whoopi's eyes sparkled now with a mix of challenge and amusement. "So, you're saying you'd rather be uncomfortable than compromise yourself?" she asked, leaning forward again, her presence suddenly imposing, a subtle predator circling her prey. Zendaya's posture didn't waver. She met the gaze directly, her voice measured, almost daring. "Yes," Zendaya said simply. "Every time." There was a brief, loaded silence. You could feel the studio holding its breath, cameras capturing every twitch, every micro-expression. Then, as if sensing that the moment was at its peak, Whoopi's smile softened just slightly. But her words were sharper than ever. "Well, honey, let's see how far that honesty gets you. Because some folks out there don't want honesty. They want perfection. And they'll test you until you crack." Zendaya's lips pressed together for a moment before she responded, a calmness now laid with steel. "I know that," she said. "And I'm ready for it. I've built my career not by avoiding challenges, but by facing them head-on." The words seemed to hang in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. The audience felt it. The tension was no longer contained in the dialogue. It was in the room, in the hum of anticipation, in the collective heartbeat of everyone watching. Whoopi leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes locked on Zendaya. The smirk returned, but it was tempered now with respect, tinged with the recognition of a worthy adversary. "All right then," she said, the words like a low rumble of a storm just beginning. "Let's see how that plays out, shall we?" The camera panned slightly, catching the subtle reactions of the co-hosts. Sunany host's eyebrows were raised, her hands clasped tightly on the table, sensing the rising tension. Joy Behar exchanged a glance with another host, her lips pressed into a thin line, almost unable to hide the intrigue and excitement coursing through her. The audience, silent but electric, seemed to lean in collectively, as if pulled forward by invisible threads toward the inevitable collision about to unfold. Zendaya took a slow breath, exhaling just enough to release the tension coiling inside her chest. Her next words would set the tone for what became one of the most shocking on-air clashes in recent memory. She smiled, carefully measured, but there was a spark in her eyes, a subtle defiance that only intensified the charged atmosphere. "And you know," she said softly, letting her words linger, "sometimes facing the discomfort, standing in your truth is exactly what changes the conversation." The audience audibly shifted, murmurs rippling through the room. Cameras clicked, lights reflected off surfaces, and the studio seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Whoopi's grin widened again, leaning forward slightly. The tension now a tangible entity between them. The clash had officially begun, not with a shout, not with overt conflict, but with a slow, deliberate push and counter, a test of boundaries and wills. And as Zendaya prepared her next words, both women knew this wasn't just an interview. It was a showdown, a duel of perspectives. And nobody in that studio or watching from home would ever forget what was about to happen next. The air in the studio had thickened. Each word between Zendaya and Whoopi now landing like deliberate strikes. The audience could sense it. The tension had left polite curiosity behind and entered a realm where every glance, every subtle inflection carried weight. Zendaya's composure remained intact, but it was sharper now, precise, a blade of confidence wrapped in elegance. Whoopi, on the other hand, radiated a predator's awareness, probing for the slightest crack in her guest's armor. "Let us talk influence," Whoopi said, her tone casual but loaded, as if tossing a pebble into still water, watching the ripples expand. "You're young, you're talented, and people hang on your every word. But does that pressure ever feel suffocating? Like every move you make is a statement." Her eyes locked onto Zendaya's measuring, calculating, the subtle hum of tension in the room intensified. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the unspoken duel unfolding. Zendaya paused, a small inhale, a beat that seemed longer than time itself. Then she responded, her voice steady, but carrying a quiet force. "It's not easy," she admitted. "Every choice is scrutinized. Every decision is magnified, But I've realized that influence is also responsibility. And if I can use it to spark conversation, to shed light on stories that matter, that pressure becomes purpose. A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience, appreciative but charged, sensing the strength behind her words. Whoopi leaned in, her grin sharpening, a glint of challenge in her eyes. "Purpose, huh?" she said. "That's noble and all, but let's not kid ourselves. People want your persona, your image. They want the flawless star. And when that persona doesn't line up with the real you, the backlash is brutal." Zendaya's gaze didn't waver. Instead, a flicker of fire sparked. The kind that doesn't shout, but commands attention. "I know," she said softly. "I've learned that staying true to yourself isn't always easy. It's messy. People won't always get it, but that doesn't make it any less important." The audience shifted again, the tension vibrating through the room. Whoopi's expression softened for a heartbeat, just enough to reveal her amusement, but her words returned with a sharper edge. "Messy, huh? That's a polite way of saying complicated. But complications make people uncomfortable, and some of the people watching will attack before they even try to understand." Zendaya leaned slightly forward, her hands resting lightly on the table. "Then let them," she said calmly. "I'd rather face discomfort than compromise authenticity. That's the truth." The pause that followed was electric. A moment so thick with tension that you could almost hear the studio collectively holding its breath. Cameras captured every twitch, every micro-expression, the smallest flicker of emotion magnified by the lens. It was the kind of pause that defined live television, the space where anything could erupt, where reputations could shift in a heartbeat. Whoopi tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. And for a split second, the playful exterior dropped, revealing the sharp insight that made her a legend in television. "You sound fearless," she said, voice low and deliberate. "But fearlessness isn't freedom. Sometimes it's just blind courage. How do you know you're not just fooling yourself?" Zendaya's lips pressed together, then parted with a deliberate calm, her voice unwavering. "I've had time to reflect," she said. "I know what I stand for, what I value. Fearless or not, I'm honest with myself first. That's what matters. The rest, the opinions, the backlash, the noise, it's secondary." The studio audience murmured in awe, sensing the gravity of the exchange. Whoopi leaned back, her hands steepled, watching Zendaya with something between admiration and challenge. There was respect there, subtle but undeniable, acknowledging that she had found someone who could stand toe-to-toe without faltering. "Respect for your convictions, sure," Whoopi said, voice measured. "But let's be real. Confrontation doesn't just happen online. It happens here in real life. And people in this industry, they'll test you, push you. You've got to be ready for it." Zendaya's eyes flickered for a heartbeat, a subtle recognition of the truth behind Whoopi's words. Then she smiled slightly, not breaking her composure, but letting a glimmer of warmth seep through. "I'm ready," she said simply. "And if that means standing firm when it gets tough, then that's exactly what I'll do." A ripple of applause moved through the audience, soft but meaningful, as the tension slightly shifted. Cameras captured the co-hosts exchanging glances. Sunny host's eyebrows raised in impressed acknowledgement, Joy Behar leaning forward with subtle excitement, each host recognizing that they were witnessing a rare, unfiltered collision of personalities. Whoopi's smirk returned sharper this time, as if delighted by the challenge. "Well, I can see you've got grit," she said. "But remember, this isn't just about grit. It's about how you handle the unexpected, the uncomfortable. And trust me, honey, in this world, the unexpected comes fast." Zendaya nodded, her posture unwavering, her gaze calm but resolute. "I've learned to navigate it," she said, the subtle fire in her voice hinting at more than mere words. "The unexpected doesn't scare me. It teaches me. It shapes me." The audience seemed to lean in collectively, the tension now crackling like static electricity. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a masterclass in presence, in poise under pressure, in the art of standing firm when every gaze is trained on you, dissecting, judging. Cameras moved subtly, capturing every nuance, the rise and fall of voices, the slight movements, the weight of each carefully chosen word. For a moment, the room held a delicate balance, each woman matching the other in intensity and subtle force. Then, as Whoopi's next question began, the tension spiked again. unseen currents swirling beneath the surface, hinting that the confrontation was far from over. Something bigger, sharper, more shocking was waiting just beyond the polite veneer, and every eye in the studio knew it. Zendaya's pulse steadied, her mind focused, every fiber of her being aligned for the challenge that was unfolding live in front of millions. This wasn't acting. This wasn't a performance. This was raw, real, unfiltered confrontation, and neither woman had yet shown the full measure of what was coming next. The air in the studio had transformed from tense to electric. Every subtle movement, every glance, every carefully measured word carried a charge. Zendaya's calm had solidified into a quiet, unyielding force. Whoopi, sensing both challenge and opportunity, leaned in just enough to remind everyone in the room that she was not someone easily intimidated. The audience could feel it. The kind of tension that makes hairs stand on end. The kind that grips you even through the television screen. "I am," she said. "The storm doesn't frighten me. What matters is staying true to myself. People will react, criticize, celebrate, and misinterpret, but I cannot control that. I can only control my choices and my integrity." A murmur of admiration swept through the audience. Cameras caught the subtle nods of the co-hosts. Sunny host's expression softened into a respectful acknowledgement. Joy Bijo leaned forward, a hint of excitement in her eyes, and even Whoopi allowed a small smile to play across her face, a silent recognition that Zendaya had proven her strength under fire. The exchange seemed to pause, a breath held collectively by everyone in the room. For a moment, there were no words, just the electric tension of respect between two people who had tested each other to the limit and emerged transformed. And then, slowly, the audience erupted into applause, warm, thunderous, and genuine. This wasn't just approval. It was acknowledgement of the rare courage and composure Zendaya had displayed on live television. As the applause settled, Zendaya smiled, a glimmer of relief softening her expression, but not diminishing her strength. Whoopi leaned forward, voice lighter, but still commanding. "You handled yourself well, young lady. Not everyone could have done what you just did, facing scrutiny, pressure, and expectation all at once and still standing tall. Respect." Zendaya's smile widened just slightly. "Thank you," she replied. "I believe honesty and integrity aren't just words, they are actions, and I try to live by that every day." The cameras lingered on the moment, capturing the subtle hand gestures, the eye contact, the energy of a clash that had escalated from polite conversation to a riveting showdown of intellect, courage, and emotional strength. The co-hosts began exchanging quiet reactions. Sunny Hostin clapping softly, Joy Biha chuckling under her breath, and even Whoopi shaking her head with an impressed grin. The audience's applause grew again louder, a collective acknowledgement that they had witnessed something rare. Outside the studio, the fallout was immediate. Social media erupted within minutes. Fans dissecting every moment, replaying the exchange, debating who had won the clash, and sharing clips that highlighted the intensity of the conversation. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines capturing phrases like "Zendaya holds her ground on live TV" and "Whoopi Goldberg versus Zendaya, the showdown no one saw coming." The conversation dominated trending topics for hours, with fans praising Zendaya's poise and maturity, while others marveled at Whoopi's unrelenting style that pushed the interview to its limits. Back in the studio, the atmosphere had softened, but the residual energy lingered. Zendaya and Whoopi shared a moment of mutual acknowledgement, a nod, a subtle smile, a recognition of the intensity they had just navigated together. The audience could feel it, the co-hosts could feel it, and viewers at home had felt it through the screen. This was a moment that would be remembered, replayed, and discussed for years. And as the show wrapped, the camera lingered one last time on Zendaya, poised, composed, and radiant. Her presence alone spoke volumes about the resilience, courage, and authenticity required to navigate the world of celebrity under public scrutiny. Whoopi's commentary in the closing moments highlighted the mutual respect earned through the clash, emphasizing that confrontation, when handled with integrity and composure, could be transformative, even electrifying. So, what do you think? Did Zendaya hold her ground? Was Whoopi's challenge fair or relentless? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective. And don't forget to subscribe for more explosive, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Every confrontation, every clash, every moment of tension captured in cinematic detail. Right here, where the drama unfolds live and history is made. The cameras faded out. But the conversation had only just begun. Social feeds lit up, fans debated, memes were created, and the studio's energy lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Zendaya had faced scrutiny, challenge, and expectation, and emerged not just unscathed, but elevated, a symbol of honesty and courage in the public eye. The storm had passed, but the impact would echo for days, weeks, and even months, reminding everyone that the true measure of a star isn't just fame. It's the strength to confront the unexpected and remain authentic no matter what comes next.